Gracie Jiu Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to episode 130 of the Gracie Jiu Jitsu Rocks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marty Josie, and thanks for listening. Today my guest will be Clark Gracie, and we'll get to that in just a moment, but before we do, let's start with our Jiu Jitsu quote. And that is, "The art of Jiu Jitsu is worth more in every way than all other athletics combined." And that's from President Theodore Roosevelt in 1905. Pretty cool. All right, Clark Gracie is the grandson of Grand Master Carlos Gracie and the son of Grand Master Carley Gracie. He's one of the most successful competitors within the Gracie family and extremely successful throughout the world. He's founder of Clark Gracie Jiu Jitsu and the Gracie Allegiance Academy and the Gracie Allegiance team. So it was my extreme honor to be able to sit down and have a conversation with Clark. In this interview, he talks about how he's coping with the current COVID-19 situation and his thoughts on moving forward, his philosophy on training, sport versus competition focus, academy culture, creativity in jiu-jitsu, what makes him so successful in competition, balancing the pressure with becoming the best you can be, most common mistakes in competition prep, importance of mindset, putting yourself in bad positions intentionally, his new BJJ Fanatics video program, Automatic Omoplata System, growing up as a Gracie, his grandfather, Grand Master Carlos Gracie, and his father, Grand Master Carley Gracie, and their impact on him, the evolution of BJJ, Gracies that don't do jiu-jitsu, his girlfriend and his son, and what he's most proud of and most grateful for, and more. So I know you're going to enjoy this interview. After the interview, make sure you stay tuned for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. And now, without further ado, let's talk to Clark. All right, I have the pleasure and honor to be speaking with Clark Gracie, founder of Clark Gracie Jiu Jitsu, Gracie Allegiance Academy, and the Gracie Allegiance team. So welcome, Clark.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on the podcast.
The honor's mine, my friend. So there's a lot of things I would like to ask you about, Clark, but let's start off by getting a little bit into, this COVID-19 situation has certainly been challenging for the people in this country. How has the recent self-isolation affected you, Clark?
Oh, it's a complete lifestyle change, being at home a lot and trying to find other ways to be busy. And honestly, has made me really think about the future of jiu-jitsu and how people are going to respond once they're allowed to come back, if they're going to be scared, if they're going to be excited to come back, what the split on that is going to be with the community. And but I've also learned a lot of other ways to stay active with jiu-jitsu, sharing jiu-jitsu through videos and even just getting creative with solo drills and movements. So really, it took me out of the box for a minute and had to find ways to, continue to motivate my student base, my team, even though we can't get on the mat all together now. So it's been a little bit tough, but educational at the same time.
Yeah, I think it took us all by surprise, and we've had to adjust. And thank God for Zoom meetings and things like that, and being able to continuously put stuff out there. What about from a resiliency standpoint? Do you do anything for self care or anything that helps you manage the stress during these times?
Well, you're saying resilience as far as like physically and staying
Physically,
in shape,
emotionally,
or?
yeah, all that.
Well, I think it's important that we maintain balance in our lives. Unfortunately, the balance of having like a social life is going to be very limited. But I think just getting balance of getting outside and getting some fresh air and sunshine is important. I've talked to people that have been locked in their houses, for a couple months now, and a lot of people were able to work from home. Some people can't, so it's been challenging. But it's forced me to cook a lot more, so I feel like I'm even eating a little bit healthier because I'm preparing all my meals and find new ways to stay busy and get creative. But definitely can be a little bit of a mental struggle because especially I'm sure for a lot of industries, but in our industry we kind of must be concerned a little bit about the COVID situation because you can't get too much closer, right, than what we're doing in jiu-jitsu. And it's a little bit scary when you start to think about people being scared to get close to each other and how that's going to affect our livelihood and our art, future of our sport.
I agree.
Yeah.
I know it's been. I've definitely been doing more of a at home backyard workout. Have mats in the garage with the grappling dummies, so I've been kind of keeping active with that. But doing in the backyard, body weight and doing circuits and things like that. But man, it for me, it's mentally staying on track because I put a lot in my workouts and my nutrition when I'm on track mentally. But if I let that go, or if it ends up waning, or I go through a low point, that I see a change in all those areas. It all affects the whole.
Yeah, I agree. What I'm going to start recommending as things start to loosen up a little bit and people start to come back to training in the near future here, hopefully, is that people get one training partner, maybe two, keep their circle small. When they come to class, they find one partner and they're just going to train with that one person and see how that goes for a few weeks. And that's kind of what I've been doing. Actually, I think, I'm a little bit different than the general population because I have an academy that I can open up. We sterilize it, and I got together with a couple friends, and we get together, we film techniques, some of the instructors in the school. We train a bit, so I'm able to continue my training, but with just much more limited amount of people. And I think if people treat it that way as they start to come back, or even like for yourself, you have some mats in the backyard. If you have one person that is not around anyone high risk and hasn't had symptoms and hasn't been around anyone with symptoms, maybe that can be a good way to maintain, and someone also to help you stay motivated. Right. And it's been really helpful for me my girlfriend's been telling me every morning, like, hey, let's do a workout. So it's been great to have a partner to do something with, and have a little push.
Awesome. I've been trying to also think, definitely in terms of jiu-jitsu, but also just in my personal life, how am I going to be, what's the silver lining? What have I gained by this time? And not just see it as a negative, and what am I going to carry forward and that will help me be a better person having gone through this, and almost think of it as kind of like a reset, and let's start some new fresh things and keep them going on the other side of this.
Yeah, I'm definitely trying to look at that as well. I don't want to look at it as just time lost, money lost, opportunities lost. I want to think that I was able to invest some of my time into something more positive, as many people do when they get deprived from their regular routine and their comfort zone. So I think for me, it's been the ability to start to build a video jiu-jitsu library, which is something I'm excited about, and I want to actually keep that going. And it's a way that I can reach a huge number of population in comparison to what I've been doing just in the academy, so Absolutely. It's something that I want to continue going forward with that. And I know a lot of people have been doing it so far, but even if I create it just for my team and for reference, I think it's important. You know?
Yeah, and you recently made available your Omoplata system on BJJ Fanatics, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes, but I definitely want to highlight that. But for a moment, let's talk about your academy and the philosophy. So I read, you will not get watered down technique or be taught how to win a tournament without knowing how to defend yourself on the street. We will teach you to be comfortable anywhere, with or without strikes, on the feet, on the ground, off your back, how to control the situation, and how to have fun while learning it. I love that. Many of our students are law enforcement, mixed martial artists, and members of the armed forces. People have diverse needs. That is why we have assembled equally diverse resources for the students at our school. So I like that a lot. So speak to that a little bit and elaborate on that philosophy, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I believe in heavily, and it's something I feel like we stand for, and I'm excited about teaching jiu-jitsu in that format. Some schools are really focused on one way or the other. Like some schools are saying we only care about being able to defend ourselves in a street situation, in a real life situation, and that's awesome. That's I came up kind of in that environment as well with my father, Carlos Gracie. He teaches in San Francisco, and I grew up, just with that philosophy, not really thinking about points too much. But as I was a teenager, jiu-jitsu competition became way more popular, started building a lot, and started to grow in the sport direction. So it's a side of jiu-jitsu I enjoy as well. I love it. I love the challenge. I love the, maybe you train for a street fight, but you never have the opportunity to actually use it, right? The sport is something beautiful of our art because it gives us the opportunity to test ourselves, to use it against someone who's equally trying to put all that force against you, right? So we get to test ourselves, although I don't want to be known as a school that's one or the other only, like some schools are so focused on sport, and then other schools may say, well, these guys, if they were to get in a real street fight, they wouldn't know what to do. They would pull guard. They'd start to do some advanced jiu-jitsu techniques, which wouldn't work in, let's say, an MMA scenario or a street fight scenario. So whether you're training for MMA or self-defense, it's kind of similar, right? Because, the guy in MMA is just going to be more experienced. But I think that's really important as we see jiu-jitsu grow these days, is maintaining the side of jiu-jitsu that is real, is for why did it become so popular in the first place? Well, because Royce went out there, inspired a bunch of people, being a smaller guy, fighting these big giant guys with no time limit, no rules, which is something that's never been done in American viewing eyes, and shocked the world. And that was, what blew everyone away. It wasn't like, oh, did you see how he came out of 50-50 and took the back and made 4 points and then won the match right before time limit? Right. It wasn't really about the points. And even MMA is going in that direction now, which, is towards the points, and there's time limits, shorter time limits now, which I think favor the striker. But I think, it's important that we give them the full package. People come to jiu-jitsu for different reasons. Mm-hmm. And I think most people deep down inside, whether they're doing it for fun, for fitness, for friends, for community, deep down inside, they know that they're building inside of them an insurance system that if anything was ever to happen to them, they have some knowledge of how to react. And the beautiful thing is they get to step on the mat every day and test it against numerous individuals of different sizes, different backgrounds, and that's something beautiful about our art. So I think it's important that we maintain that.
I agree 100%. I think that too often, a school will focus on one aspect or the other, and exclusion of the other. And I like your philosophy that, let's do it all. And let's do it all to the, the best of our abilities and high level. So foundationally, you want to be ready for an encounter should it ever happen. But like you said, that it may not ever happen. So once you build that foundation of knowing you can take care of yourself and keeping it sharp, why not focus on the joy and fun that competition can bring, but also the just having to deal with nerves and adrenaline dump and all the other things that come with that, plus just the fun of more of the competitive style techniques and flows and things. So there's a lot to all of it. So I like, your approach where you're going to do it all. It's great.
Yeah, and while doing it, I've seen schools that run their schools in very different ways. Some are very relaxed manner. Some are very structured, very rigid, like almost military style. I think, find somewhere in between. People, they want structure. That's why they're paying you, right? They want to have someone giving them direction and pushing them and encouraging them, motivating them. But at the same time, not to the point where they're scared, or they're even scared to be creative. They're scared to talk, to move, to do something that's thinking too far outside of the box. So I think, it's important that as we create this, as we do that teaching, at least for me and my team, that, and my academy, I like to create an environment where people feel the freedom to be creative with their jiu-jitsu, because I believe that how do you become creative with jiu-jitsu is you have to be having fun doing it. Otherwise, you're not going to be very creative. You think about any sport, any art, the person is passionate and they're enjoying what they're doing. They're not being forced to do it. They're not, even if you force your kids to go do jiu-jitsu, at some point they're having fun, right? They're having fun. And if they're going to get good at it, probably you have to have them having fun first. Make sure they're having a good time. And then they start to use their creativity and build something inside their mind that is their own, and have a personalized connection with the art, not something that's only something that's by the book and taught.
Yeah,
so.
I love that. Some places are overly structured, and that stifles. I mean, there's merit to it to some degree, but that stifles creativity. Like you said, it's not expansive; it's confining, and you're kind of afraid to be who you are and really let go, and flow and be creative. And on the other side, you can be so, I guess, lackadaisical that there's no structure at all, and that's probably not the best either. So somewhere in the middle sounds like the best of all worlds.
Yeah.
Let me ask you with this. You touched on competition, so you certainly have done a lot of competition and been hugely successful. I think you're either the or one of the most active competing members of the Gracie family. So, Clark, in your opinion, what's made you so successful?
Well, I think, like I was saying, I had fun with jiu-jitsu, and I enjoyed it. I think it also began feeling that it was my responsibility to do it. So it wasn't purely for my own joy,
Right.
Because I felt that I had to carry that responsibility and go do it. But I enjoyed doing it. There are moments where, you face struggle and difficulties, but you feel that in the end you're getting something out of it, right? You're feeling great, you're feeling tired, but you're feeling good, and all the while, I think one of the things that keeps us in jiu-jitsu most, the community that we go back to on a regular basis, right? We come back and we have our team in the academy that we're talking with, we're training with, we're enjoying each other's company in that social environment. And then when we go to compete, what an amazing feeling to be going out there and all those people that you train with daily are doing the same thing as you, or they are on the sidelines coaching you, yelling, screaming for you, cheering for you when you win. That's an amazing feeling. And then you doing the same thing for your teammates, so I think it's very natural for humans to have a sport connection in their life, even if it's something that they don't do. How many Americans sit down and watch major sports on a regular basis, baseball, football, whatever it may be. And that may be our outlet, right? Jiu-jitsu. For me, it was, for sure, right? I found my sport. I found my activity. And not only am I a fan of it, but it's something that I want to be a part of, And I just really love the idea of pushing myself to the idea of thinking, I'm a professional athlete. I want to treat myself like a professional athlete. I want to push myself to my limits and expand my limits to see how far I can go, So that's been a bit of my motivation along with just everything that goes in with my upbringing and my family, my father.
Yeah, there's a certain aspect of pressure or expectation with growing up as a Gracie, I'm sure. So talk to us about the level of pressure you felt, and how did you balance that with making it fun, and then also being serious enough to become the best you could ultimately be?
Yeah, I think honestly, it's a fine line, because you might feel so much pressure that you just want to like turn away from it, right? Like think, all right, this is not fun anymore. I want to do something else. And I've heard people say that jiu-jitsu is not really fun for me. I enjoyed the training in the academy, and I don't really like the competitive side of it because I feel too much pressure. And some people embrace that pressure, right? So I think that I was struggling back and forth in that line for years, but I kept at it, and when I felt like my body was feeling good and my technique was sharp, I said, okay, let's go. I'll go with the team and let's go compete, especially in the lower belts. And I was learning how to keep my body in prime situation, prime condition where I felt that I can perform. And I didn't like to compete when I didn't feel like I could give it 100%. So that, yeah, it could go either way. I've seen a lot of cousins and people in my family just kind of like, okay, I learned jiu-jitsu, but I don't really want to carry that load to be like, oh, you lost, you're not that good, And then there's other people in my family that they'll embrace the win, the loss, the whatever it is, and somebody told me one time that Kelly Slater made a quote one time, made a speech and said, I got to take my wins like my losses, and he understands, he said something upon the lines of, everyone loses and everybody, may have the chance to win, but you can't let that idea like, okay, I lost, so I'm giving up, can you come back out of that? Can you come out of it on a positive note and learn from it and come back stronger, right? And that's something that, it's something that for sure, if you're able to do that, you're going to grow from the experience in anything in life, right? People compare jiu-jitsu to so many different things in life, and I think once you are able to grasp that idea, maybe you're doing something that you're not that good at, but you keep at it, you're persistent, you learn it as deeply as possible, and with time, for sure, especially if you're having fun with it, you're going to become good at it.
Absolutely.
So embrace the pressure, embrace whatever it is, but keep moving forward, and with time you're going to be at it. So I think a lot of people in my family stopped competing or held back from competing for the pressure of their fathers, their upper generation. Like I had the same pressure. My father told me, after you're 18, you're not allowed to lose anymore.
Wow.
And he's like, it's
No
okay if he loses now. He's 14, he's 16, no problem. But maybe in his time, that was something that it could be achievable, because the community of jiu-jitsu is way smaller, and the people that were best at jiu-jitsu were majority found in my father's family, direct family. So because they were the ones that were leading the growth of jiu-jitsu in Brazil, right? Mm-hmm. But these days, there are many people that are way more athletic, just have great genes, and they're able to spend hours and hours. They fall in love with jiu-jitsu as well, and they're focused and dedicated and training for whatever reason they are. And it's hard to keep up with some of these guys for sure. But if you're able to accept the fact that you're going to lose, but you're going to get better, then go for it.
Keep moving forward, right?
Yeah.
See, I like how you said, as long as it's fun, do it. And sometimes it won't be fun, and you can embrace the suck, so to speak, if you see the value of what competition and training for competition can give you. And it's not all about wins and losses. We all want to win when we compete, but there's so much you can gain as well in your defeats. So as long as you don't make the end all be all winning or losing, but you see value in the competing, I think you can really fare well. What do you think are the most common mistakes people make when they're training for competition, and also how important is mindset training?
The mindset is huge. You have to have. I've heard people go through all kinds of crazy mental challenges before they step on the mat at a competition, on their way, the days before. For sure, I can attest to the fact that I've lost sleep before, especially in my lower belts. I think it's something you're getting used to. But once I got to black belt, I just I kind of lost that a bit and just embraced the idea of, hey, I'm going to war tomorrow, and I'm going to war, but I'm not going to die.
Right.
I get to experience a little bit of that adversity. But I know in the end, the worst that can happen is I'm going to tap, and then that's it. Just come back to the lab and keep learning. And I think if you can embrace that, then you're going to be able to continue to test yourself and get better. As far as what's the worst thing you can do, was that the question? What's the worst
common
thing
mistakes or worst thing you can do
before a competition? I would say directly before a competition is, think that, okay, I'm about to go compete, so I'm going to go eat something that you think might do you well, but your body's not used to it. For example, I'm about to go compete, so someone once told me that if I eat a bunch of red meat, I'm going to get a testosterone bump, and I'll go out there raging, But then you eat all that and you feel really heavy and slow and sluggish, and it's weighing you down and you can't move as well, eating a huge steak or something, and maybe for some people that's going to do them great, but I think you got to test your nutritional intake and your performance of that meal daily and remember it, so what does your body work on what's the best fuel for your body, and remember what you're eating and then how you felt after that training session. If you felt great one training session, hey, what did I eat right before? What did I eat last night? What did I eat today and yesterday? And then kind of remember that for the day of your competition, to replicate something. And if you didn't feel good, well, then let's avoid this and that. I'm sure we've had days where we just feel like, I don't feel good in my body right now. Probably it's because of something that I put in my body. So that would be important, I think, for directly before the competition. I think stretching is a huge, important part of training in general, especially competition, because your partner, your opponent, is going to be trying to fold you in all different kinds of positions. So you better be a little bit limber. You better be ready. Otherwise, you're going to have it's very possible you're going to have an injury, and you're not going to be able to bounce back to do it again. So we gotta take care of ourselves. We gotta prep our bodies for the battle to come. And I think a lot of people jump that step. They don't have patience for it, or they're too excited to just jump on the mat. And you hear about a lot of injuries in jiu-jitsu, I think. And I think that's something that could help us avoid a lot.
Okay. So staying loose and focusing on flexibility and the time to experiment with your nutrition and food technique and strategies is way before the actual competition and not day of, right?
Yeah, and then mentally just treat it like another day on the mat, really. We step on the mat, we have fun, we were pretty loose and relaxed, but then when we step on the tournament mat, we let those nerves take over, and we get overly tense and maybe don't act the way we normally would in the academy and have poor performance because of it. I think that's a lot of people have that experience. And so I think once the mentality kicks in that it's just another day, it's just another person standing there with a gi and standing in front of me, and I can probably do the same thing I do in my academy every day, so let's give it a try.
Right on. So I know you're well versed in gi and no gi, and highly successful in both, Clark. Do you have a preference on either one, or do you like them equally?
I mean, I usually just say that I enjoy whatever I'm training the most at that moment. Okay. So when I'm training for no-gi tournaments, usually the end of the year season is no-gi, and I'll be training almost all no-gi because of the tournament. I want to get as sharp as possible in that field. So when I'm training like that, I really don't like putting on the gi. I
Gotcha.
feel uncomfortable, a little bit out of my box. But same thing the other way around. If I'm training all gi because I'm getting ready for Pan Ams or Worlds or whatever, and then I go no gi, I just where's my grips? And I'm so used to making certain grips and they're not there. So I think, but I do think it's important to do both. I think we should do both, be prepared for both. And so I've started to do both throughout the year as well, but I'll still step it up a little bit more intense in one direction or the other, depending on what I'm training for, of course.
Gotcha. So you obviously do a lot of different things well, but you're somewhat known for your omoplata. Is this still your favorite go-to move, Clark, and why or why not?
I'd really enjoy the position. Yeah. I was able to, I believe, tap into my creative side of my brain in that position and maybe create a few hooks and grips and movements that make the position work a little bit easier and better and more successful. But yeah, I really enjoy all of jiu-jitsu. I like to be well versed. I don't like to think that we can be a one-trick pony. I don't think that's good jiu-jitsu. I think we need balance. Have balanced jiu-jitsu, balance in our training, be well balanced in every aspect of the fight, whether it's gi, no gi, playing bottom or top, attack, defend. You might have a day where you are training against someone where you don't have any opportunity to even show attack, but can you survive? Can you survive their attack? So it's really important, I think, that you know how to be defensive. And then when it comes the time for you to actually take, the step to find that submission, are you able to pull it off? So, being offensive, defensive, I think is very important. I think we need to find balance in our training. And, it can bring me to the point of saying when I am training for competition, I think one of the good ways to train is specific training, we'll call it, right? Specific training where we start with the person on our back, or we start with I'm in side control, I'm in the top or bottom side control, and we go through all these different positions, because when we're just sparring, I mean, you've been training for a long time, I'm sure you can imagine your regular routine. Okay, maybe I like to do this takedown and I like to use, and rarely will anyone put me in reverse half guard or something,
Right.
And I think it's important that we expose ourselves to all these situational positions so that we can be balanced.
I think that's a really important point, because we certainly all have our favorites, more of our go-to, and we tend to default, at least a lot of us. I know I do. When you're just rolling, you try either consciously or subconsciously to try to get to those places, the ones that are you're best at and you're more comfortable with. But I love what you're saying. If you intentionally put yourself in the various positions, especially some that might not be your favorite, then you have to get good there. You have to learn to survive there, and you have to get a certain level of mental comfort as well while doing so. It makes you well-rounded and, like you said, balanced.
That's right.
Well, we touched a little bit on the Omoplata system for Automatic Omoplata System, available now with BJJ Fanatics. Tell us a little bit about that, Clark.
Yeah, I had the pleasure to get connected with these guys at BJJ Fanatics, and they came to my academy, and we filmed a series of entries and problem-solving situations once you get into an omoplata, and just getting to the finish successfully. So I think a lot of people are misled a little bit in certain parts of the construction of the position, and I just wanted to show them what works for me, what's successful for me, and what I see people struggle with, where I see people lose it, and some details that help me solve some of those problems. That's usually what people are asking me about during a lot of times private lessons when I'm traveling and stuff like that. So I try to answer a lot of those questions in that video. And honestly, I feel like I could probably do 2 more instructional DVDs just on that topic alone.
I'm sure.
Going a little bit more advanced, but we have some great material, and I was really excited to be able to do it. And luckily, I did it early part of this year, right before this whole thing happened, and I think it's something that people are probably going to right now a lot, is going to watching jiu-jitsu online. Not like they weren't doing it before, of course they were doing it a lot, but now we don't have the resource of the mat all the time, so
right,
this can be the way to go.
Well, that's great. I know a lot of people have caught on to the BJJ Fanatics and all that they offer. They have some great stuff out there. So with the addition of yours, it's even that much better. So anyone listening, if you're looking for something, you definitely want to check that one out.
Yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it.
Yeah. So Clark, you touched on just a little bit the pressure, being a Gracie and growing up. Let's explore that a little more. You were born in San Francisco, if I'm not mistaken, but you also did a lot of back and forth between San Francisco and Rio or Brazil, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So how often did you make that trek, and what was that like going back and forth, and what stands out about growing up as a Gracie?
Yeah, I went back and forth at various times until I was in high school, and then when I started high school, I moved to Brazil with my dad. He was going there a lot more, and he was kind of split his time. So that worked out well for me, just being there with him, and started training out there as well. And it was a great experience. I was able to connect a lot more with a lot of my family in Brazil, who at the time they were majority, all were still there. And nowadays it's a little different. Not too many people are in Rio anymore, but that was about 20 years ago. So I think between then and now, everyone's found a little hub of their own, all my cousins and family members. So, I think feeling that pressure of being Gracie, growing up Gracie, I mean, there's a lot of topics about that. I'm not sure what direction.
Well, it's a little bit of a. It seems like it might be a little bit of a double-edged sword, at least from my perspective. So many people probably are envious of someone getting, lucky enough to be born into the Gracie family. So you're like, wow, you're part of the elite Gracie family. But at the same time, I'm sure it's not all roses, and there's a certain pressure that comes with that. And from the outside, everybody views something one way. But when they're on the inside of something, it's a different thing. And I'm not saying it was good or bad. I'm just saying I'm sure it was multifaceted a lot more than people realize.
Yeah, my dad used to always tell me everyone wants to see a Gracie lose,
Right.
And I'm sure in his time that was way more of an issue than it is now, because I mean there's a lot of good people out there, but in his generation, his time when he was competing in like the late 60s and early 70s, the Gracie family was the family that knew the most, was the most advanced. So if someone outside the family could come in, especially a different martial art, and could beat one of the Gracies, it was a big deal, So now things are a little different, of course. People are cross-training a bunch. People are training a martial art called mixed martial arts, right? It's MMA. It's not even one martial art anymore,
Right.
So they just want to be, a little good at everything, But I think it's, I think one thing that's tough about being Gracie is that, that everybody wants to go after you, get you, and you gotta accept that if you're not that good, you're gonna get tapped a bunch. Then people might be able to talk to you, or they will talk. Oh, I tapped that Gracie kid, and that's not really helping your motivation to, depending what kind of person you are, your motivation to continue to train. And then I remember going with one of my cousins, my younger cousins, one time to an academy in Brazil, and they were saying, "This kid's Gracie. Can you believe it? He doesn't like jiu-jitsu. He doesn't even want to be here right now." He didn't want to train, and they thought that was just crazy. They're making fun of him about it. And he turned out to be really smart with like computers and like software and stuff. But it's a big family. It really is a big family. Not that many people know, I think, but my grandfather Carlos Gracie, the first one to learn jiu-jitsu from from the Japanese Mitsuda Maeda, who brought it to Brazil, he had 21 children.
Yeah, that's crazy, man.
And more than half were boys, so very competitive family. And that's my father's generation.
That's a lot of kids.
Yeah, so it's a big family. There's a lot of, and I think I counted, I was looking at my family tree one time, counted direct straight cousins. I think it was around between 75 and 80. Wow. That was like 10 years ago, I was looking at that family tree, and they're still being born today. My father has 5-year-old twin boys. It's crazy. Like that my generation keeps growing.
Your father and your grandfather, they kept having them well into their late in life, right?
Yeah, into their 60s. I think my father said that his last child was born. My grandfather's last child was born like around 70 years old, if I'm not mistaken. But and my father's right around the corner from that. He had his last kids at 65. So it's pretty crazy.
That's pretty crazy, but pretty cool. So did you get to spend much time with your grandfather, Grand Master Carlos?
Yeah, he passed away when I was 10 years old, but I did spend some time with him before that when I was like 8, just on some trips to Brazil that we made.
What stands out in your mind about that time you did get to spend with him?
Well, I mean, there were just so many stories I heard, so many stories about him and how he was just a very, important figure, leader of the family. He would be the guy, he was like the agent of the family, marking fights for everyone, directing all of his children, not only his children, but, there's the whole side of the family of Elio, and Elio was his youngest brother. I believe he was 10 years younger than Carlos. And Elio looked up to him as like his master, and so I believe, that wasn't my time, but from what I hear, he was very influential in the family. Let's just say, at that time he was kind of like the godfather of the family. Right. A lot of respect and people coming to him for guidance, and even a big part of his life was dedicated towards the Gracie diet, developing a diet for his family, for his fighters, and using himself as a guinea pig to see what was the best fuel for your body.
Right. That's competition. An incredible gift that he gave the world on that. And he was very ahead of his time, learning about nutrition and mixing of the different foods and what to mix and what not to fix. Let me ask you, when you were young, when you spent some time with him, did you know at the time, I know you said you heard stories, but did you know kind of on what level he was as far as respected around the world at that time, or did you learn more of that later, after you got away?
Well, around the world, is a term that I wouldn't say at that time it was, because when I was 10 years old, the UFC started, and that's when it really started to grow, and even when the UFC started, it took a while after that, maybe like another 10 years to really blow up and get some speed to where it is, even now, I mean, it's way faster than, 10 years ago. So,
sure.
But yeah, I knew what he did. I knew that he created the Gracie diet and brought to the family and to the world Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Gracie Jiu Jitsu, and from my father and from my uncles and things I've heard, and so I just look at him as like a older wise man at the time. I remember he would only wear white clothes. Everything he wore was white. If you look at a lot of pictures of him, especially in his older years, everything's white all the time. So I thought that was interesting, and just I always had a lot of respect for the elders in my family, and just elders in general. I try to learn from people with more experience, and
it's a great attitude. So what about your father, Grandmaster Carley, who's known as the Lion of the Gracie family? Tell us more about him, and what were some of the most important lessons you've learned from him?
Yeah, my father was the middle child of all of his brothers and sisters. He was number 11 of 21, and he was the first one to come to the United States, or I believe leave Brazil and start teaching jiu-jitsu. And I think 10 years after that, from 1972, when he came to the East Coast over in New York, I think about 10 years later, he told me that or mid 80s, I think people started coming, his cousins, and he started inviting people. You guys got to come. Jiu-Jitsu's going to blow up in the U.S. And then I think Horian came, started the UFC, and maybe 20 years later, and it really grew from that point. So, but yeah, my father was kind of, I think, a little bit free-minded. He's thinking about doing his own thing a little bit, and so that's why he came, I guess, to the U.S. and started teaching. He has a lot of awesome stories. If you have an opportunity to get him on the podcast, that'd be really cool, because he's got a lot of really cool stories about when he first came to the U.S. and he's looking through what I'm sure a lot of people don't know what they are these days as yellow pages,
right.
and he's trying to find a jiu-jitsu school to get some training in, and he's only finding judo. And when he does find jiu-jitsu, it's a very different style of jiu-jitsu, right? It's the old Japanese style, and they would tell him that, hey, this jiu-jitsu that you're doing, this is not the same as what we do. It's very different. You do jiu-jitsu. My dad says, oh, I don't know. I know it as jiu-jitsu. We just call it jiu-jitsu, in Brazil. We don't call it anything else, And I think he said that because of that, because he wanted to differentiate from what they were doing here in the States and calling jiu-jitsu, he said, okay, well, I'm going to call it Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. There was no such thing as Gracie Jiu-Jitsu or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu before. It was just Academia Gracie de Jiu-Jitsu, and it was just Gracie Academy of Jiu-Jitsu, and so he started calling it Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and he would make patches and put on back people's gis and say Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, So this was back in the 70s, and then from there, decades later, there was something that happened with Horian tried to trademark the name, saying Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, no one can use that name. And then the world started using the name Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? And so, of course, the world is going to adapt to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's a name that everyone can use, and it's a cultural, not a family name, right?
Right.
So, yeah, it was but he's got a lot of great stories, and really inspiring guy. He taught me the most of what I know of the Gracie diet and my foundation of all of my jiu-jitsu, and then from there, jiu-jitsu continues to evolve, of course. So I was able to train with a lot of great champions and inspirational people in my family, and other characters that I learned a lot of jiu-jitsus from in my life. So
let's talk a little bit about. Well, before I leave that, I would definitely love to have him on. As you know, I had your brother Ralston on, so maybe your dad can be next. But so, in talking about innovation and moving forward with jiu-jitsu, and do you think there are generational differences in jiu-jitsu? In other words, do you think it's evolved or progressed over the generations? And if so, how? And what should be preserved and what should continue to evolve?
Yeah, I guess it'll bring me back to what we were saying before a little bit about the academies representing what style of jiu-jitsu. People say a lot about, it's the Gracie self-defense style, or this is they do Gracie jiu-jitsu. I don't like the idea that people reference Gracie jiu-jitsu as self-defense only. To me, Gracie jiu-jitsu is the umbrella of everything that all of us do in jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu being more sport and Gracie jiu-jitsu being more self-defense. I believe they're both the same thing. They're synonyms. And there is people that focus more on the sport side of jiu-jitsu, and there's people who focus on more self-defense. And that's great. It's totally cool. Me, myself, I like to focus on both. I like to teach both. I think both are important. But one thing I remember as a little kid, I remember driving around with my dad, and he would drive by a school, a martial arts school. It could be any traditional martial art, and you see people inside, or even pictures on the wall of people jumping and doing flying kicks and doing very beautiful things, or even in movies, right? And I think of martial arts as and I think people grasp too much on the idea of an art, right? Like, let's make fighting beautiful. And that's not really the point of it, right? It doesn't have to be beautiful. If it's beautiful, great, congratulations. Work, right? But that's not yeah, it has to be functional. You know, it has to be able to work. So my biggest fear and what I see is happening with jiu-jitsu, and we touched on this a little bit, is that the sport of jiu-jitsu could be developing in a direction that is not as useful in the street. You know, I wouldn't like a police officer or, you know, someone that needs jiu-jitsu in a street situation and say, oh, I would try jiu-jitsu, but it's not very realistic, so I'm going to do something else like Krav Maga, you know, or whatever, you know, that's like purely self-defense. So I think it's very important that we, as teachers, as representatives of the art, take the responsibility to learn jiu-jitsu that can be used in every scene, right, in every situation. Not only the sport, which is beautiful and it's growing, and you know, it's probably the main platform of where jiu-jitsu is, how jiu-jitsu is evolving, but hold on to that side of jiu-jitsu that can save your life, you know, in a street fight, or when someone really wants to take something from you or cause harm to someone that you know, or someone or yourself, you know how to defend yourself.
Yeah. So preserve the core functional elements that keep it
effective.
Real. Okay, yeah, real in the street, and then experiment and play with some of the more elaborate and different kinds of sportive techniques and things.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of sport jiu-jitsu is applicable,
sure,
to street situations, you know. But not everyone can be an athlete, right? There's a controversial question of, or statement of, someone that trains jiu-jitsu and competes in jiu-jitsu, they're going to be able to defend themselves against like 99% of the average person is going to come and fight them in the street or come to attack them. But not everyone is a competitor, right? You're going to have a student that comes to you and says, hey, I'm traumatized from whatever traumatic experience I've had in my life, and I need to know how to defend myself. I want to know. That's why I'm coming here. I want to pay you to teach me to become more confident. Maybe it's a bully situation. They're not coming there because they want to say, hey, I want to win Pan Ams this year. You know, they want to come there because they want to know how to defend themselves. And from there, they'll probably make friends, have fun, learn jiu-jitsu, feel strong, feel in shape, gain confidence, and then say, hey, you know what? I'd like to do a competition too, you know? But it doesn't start with saying, hey, I want to be the world champion, right?
No, I agree. Yeah, so they're the ones that when they come in, initially to learn to take care of themselves, have more confidence, and then they make it a lifestyle. You know, all that they get from living the jiu-jitsu lifestyle and the camaraderie and everything. And then, like you said, eventually they may want to compete. I don't buy into the notion as much as some people that there's this giant divide between competition and self-defense. I think if you train a lot of competition, there's going to be a lot of that carries over. You're going to know how to control bodies and things like that more than the average people on the street. There may be some differences, like controlling the distance a little bit differently, you know, whether you're on the ground or standing up. But I think you know, it's not one or the other. You're going to carry over with a lot of that. But I also think the further you go into the competitive arena and the more elaborate type techniques, you kind of are getting away from some of the more real functional things. So, yeah, it's not one or the other, though.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think one of the biggest differences, and one thing we can do to avoid letting it go in the wrong direction, is say every once in a while, put on some big boxing gloves, put someone in someone's guard, right? Like, let's say I'm on top, I'm in the guard, you fell down, you're on the bottom now, and the person on top is doing nothing but trying to hit you. Their goal is not to pass your guard and get to amount or get the 3 points. You know, they're just trying to put their hands on your body, you know. So you don't even have to have them punch in the face in class, right? Just, you know, body shots even, you know, they're trying to hit the shoulders, you know, even just touch the shoulders. To say you don't have boxing gloves, just reach for the shoulder or the top of the head, and the person on the bottom has to gain control. They're not looking to get into a half guard or you know, get inverted, a position that it completely disregards the idea that that person could strike you at any moment.
Yeah, the managing the distance, and then, like you said, important there.
Yeah, and then closing the distance, standing up, of course, as well. You know, that's important.
Yeah, I think you definitely need to do what you just said is put on some gloves occasionally and then let people know, hey, you're not trying to take the person's head off. You're just trying to get them to recognize, hey, strikes are coming. Even if it's, 20% or whatever, it at least makes them focus on it in a different way. So they'll realize that they can't do some of the normal things because they're too vulnerable to strike. So you got to pull them in close, hold them, manage that distance in a whole different way and make that the priority. So I think that's an invaluable part of being well-rounded.
Yeah, and I think if every academy will do that, which is something fun to do, I think every academy is going to find a lot more balance in what they're doing, even if they're only training for sport.
Right on. So Clark, tell us a little bit about your family. You mentioned you had a girlfriend, I believe, and do you have kids?
Yeah, I have one son named Kaleo, and he's 4 years old. He's already a terror on the mat.
Nice.
He started training at 2 years old. He started watching jiu-jitsu at the academy, watching me teach and stuff when he was, I think, a week old. And it's and I have a girlfriend also. She's awesome with him, and I have family close by, cousins, and
what's your girlfriend's name? What's your girlfriend's name, and how did you guys meet?
Her name's Fernanda. We met because her brother was visiting from Brazil. He came to my academy, so he's a purple belt jiu-jitsu practitioner, someone a fan of jiu-jitsu, and came to train. And he was visiting her here in San Diego, and they came together to the academy. So nice. That's how we met.
Nice. And your son, man, nothing changes you more than having a child, right?
Yeah, that's true. Definitely puts us to opens our eyes to a whole new side of what's dangerous in the world, I'd say.
So last thing, Clark, is looking back over your life and everything you've achieved and accomplished, what are you the most proud of? And also, what are you the most grateful for?
I guess I'll be proud of one thing that I really enjoy and I'm very proud of is something that, I'm dedicating my life to, really, is being able to share jiu-jitsu. And what does that really mean? That means that, or what I'm grateful for of that is the fact that how many lives it's changing in a positive way, right? Like, I get people coming in and I don't know anything about their story, but maybe after a few months or even a year or so, they tell me, before I came to jiu-jitsu, I was extremely shy, or my self-confidence was low, or maybe I was addicted to something and I needed a positive addiction in my life. I needed a new scene, new people, get into the jiu-jitsu lifestyle. Not that they were looking for the jiu-jitsu lifestyle, but they were looking for something they didn't know what exactly it was, and they found a positive environment, or somewhere they can thrive in a positive way, and finding groups of people that think they're looking for the same thing, So I think that we'll never really know how much as jiu-jitsu practitioners, being part of the community, especially instructors as well, how many lives we touch in a positive way, and giving them something to refocus on and make their lives better. And along with that, I would say I'm very grateful for the ability to be able to continue sharing jiu-jitsu, but not only in my small circle of my academy, but I'm able to go around the world teaching seminars, teaching camps, visiting other schools, and I'm able to see the world doing something that I love doing, is teaching and competing and being around people that we all have similar ideas, so it's amazing, really, how big jiu-jitsu is and how open the jiu-jitsu community is to people that train. We have something in common instantly.
Yeah, isn't it crazy just how much it has grown over the last 20 years or so? It's just exploded.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. When I was a kid, we used to walk around passing out flyers I used to do that with one of the instructors and one of my cousins, and people would say, "What is this jiu-jitsu?" No one knew what we were talking about. We were inviting businesses to come in, people to come in, and no one knew what we were talking about. Nowadays, everyone knows. I think there's tons of kids and moms and And it's not just tough guys that are wanting to be fighters, or, maybe 20 years ago, it was only these, the guys that were fans of UFC. They would know what jiu-jitsu is because they've seen UFC once or twice, Now it's mainstream sport almost,
Definitely.
I mean, it's in the school system in Abu Dhabi, so
nice.
Yeah,
it's been great to watch
worldwide.
it. Yeah, it's been great to watch it just grow and expand and take off. But man, you sure have made an impact in the jiu-jitsu world and all over the world. So much respect for you. You've certainly been a great example of someone living the jiu-jitsu lifestyle and giving freely, for the betterment of others and their growth and development. So hats off to you, man. Thank you so much for your time and for letting us get to know a little more about you and your life. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Marty. And for everyone listening out there, and for you as well, if you guys are ever interested in coming to San Diego and training with me, you guys are more than welcome. Or feel free to send messages, give feedback on any of my videos, and let me know if you guys like it, or let me know what you guys would like to see. I'm always happy to interact with everyone out there that wants to learn. So thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Really enjoyed that conversation with Clark. What a legendary figure in jiu-jitsu. Up next is the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment.
One of the most impactful things that's ever been said to me came from one of my old teammates, rowing team in college. He's graduating, sent this letter, kind of reflecting back on his collegiate experience and what he'd learned. And one of the things he said was that in life, no one will ever care about your desire to succeed. No one cares about how much time and work you put into becoming great. It's all irrelevant. At the end of the day, what people see is a winner or a loser. Right? I mean, you either won or you simply did not. And everything leading up to that, the heart, the work ethic, the dedication, it all remains solely with you. It's a byproduct of the contract that you signed with yourself. To go through hell, to fight in the trenches, even when you're seeing no immediate validation. Which will happen, right? If success came at the snap of a finger, everyone would be running 4-minute miles and driving Ferraris. But that's not the way the world works. But when you make the decision to be different, to give up temporary comfort for something greater, you've committed to the ride of your life. And when the time comes and you cross the finish line first, or you realize success in whatever capacity, you can smile at the world as they look at you like some miracle, completely oblivious to the price that you paid for this. But you know, and there's no greater gratification than that. It's been said that it takes 10,000 hours to perfect your craft. 10,000 hours of walking away from immediate satisfaction to enter this sentence of solitude and dedication, to where you weed out mediocrity, to where you carve out your place in history. And if you're waiting for someone to come along and just make that happen for you, it'll be a long wait, my friend. Because it's your flame, and if you don't keep it lit, it will die. And a flame can be a fragile thing. Weakness, doubt, uncertainty, failures, they all want to put it out. And if you're not bigger than your body, they will. Trust me, you'll fail. Time and time again. It may not be until your 100th attempt that you even begin to see success. But if you don't have the foresight and that persistence to see past the bumps in the road, you will never know. That relentlessness, it's how you separate yourself from the people that feel sorry for themselves and watch the world from their bedroom windows. But that's not what you signed up for. Nothing good falls into your hands. It's why every day is so important. Think of every hour as a piece of paper. right? By itself, very little weight, very little significance. But committing to the grind every day causes each piece to stack up. And before you know it, you've transformed yourself and your ability. And that's what people don't see, that stack being built piece by piece. What they see is the finish line as it's crossed one by one. They see 30 seconds. They didn't see 10,000 hours. But you did. It's why you hold your head high. It's why you can smile to yourself when people talk about you, quote unquote, being born with talent. It's why you're looking at them from the podium.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. As always, I thank you for listening. Hope you're enjoying the show. If you feel like you're benefiting from the show and want to show your support, you can support us on our Patreon page and a link in the show notes. Please like and follow us on social media and help us spread the word by reposting our posts and telling others about the show. You can leave comments on the website at www.GracieJujitsuRocks.com. You can also go to iTunes and leave comments as well as rate the show, and we would appreciate a 5-star rating, which helps us with our standing in iTunes. You can also leave comments on our YouTube channel. If you have suggestions for the show, please don't hesitate to give those. We always like feedback and suggestions. Okay, that's going to do it. So until next time, this is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.